Welcome everyone to week 11 of the NFL, also known as the stretch drive to the NFL playoffs. So last week I went 4 and 2, which brings my overall record to 27, 21 and 2. So let's move on to this week. I hope you're thirsty this week because I have another six pack for you. Yep, 6 winners. So let's start things off with the New York Jets -3 over the Texans. Ryan Fitzpatrick, after having his thumb surgery last Friday, has practiced all week and feeling pretty good. And he has a bit of revenge on his mind after the Texans dumping him in the offseason. That being said, I think he is going to have a big game with help from Ivory and his other running backs against a so-so Texans run defense. And I think the size of Brandon Marshall, Curley, and Decker in the slot will give trouble to the Texans defensive backs. And on the other side of the ball, I think the Texans receivers will be in for a long day against the likes of Revis, and he has performed that well as of late, but I think he'll get back on track. In Antonio Cromartie and Scrine will do a good job against their slot receivers. And I think Houston might be coming off a high and beating the undefeated Bengals, which I think that was more of the Bengals not playing up to par as the Texans putting a whipping on them. And I know what you might be thinking, J.J. Watt's gonna be all over Fitzpatrick, but what you might not know is the offensive line of the Jets is like running into a brick wall, and they won't have to triple team him as other teams will, as they run 7-8 linemen deep. So I think the Jets will get back on track and be better positioned in the wild card race in the AFC. For my next pick, I like the Dolphins a pick against the Cowboys. So far this season, Miami has been living out of a suitcase as of playing 7 of their first 9 games on the road, including just finishing a 3-game road trip. So I think they'll be all pumped up to play in front of their home fans, especially against a team like the Cowboys. And I know what you're thinking, Tony Romo's coming back. The season is saved. But I think he'll need a game to get out all the cobwebs, and he'll show a lot of rust, especially going against a big, fast defensive line in Sue, Werner, and company. And practicing is different than the speed of an actual game. So and I think the defensive line will be all over Romo, and he'll have to throw it before he wants. And the Miami offense, I think, will have some success with Landry, Matthews, and deep threat Stills against a questionable and banged up secondary of the Cowboys, as star cover corner Claiborne might not play, or even if he does, will be a step slow due to a bad hammy. And I think the Dolphins could take advantage. And fill-in coach Dan Campbell used to be a backup tight end under the Jason Garrett coaching staff. So he's been in battle with the current Cowboy players, so he can pick up a lot of weaknesses that other teams might not be able to, and he'll use that to his advantage. So I look for the Dolphins to win their second in a row and keep their wild card hopes alive. For my next pick, I like the Raiders a pick against the Lions. I don't know how they did it, but miracles do happen in the Lions in the win over Green Bay. Even saying that, they even tried to let the Packers off the hook. And the Raiders lost a tough game to a physical and overpowering Vikings defense. But the Raiders get a little vacation in testing the Lions defense. I think the Raiders' speed out wide and in the backfield with Murray and the receivers of Crabtree, Cooper, and Holmes will be too much for the Lions' beat-up secondary. And I don't think Carr will be under the fierce pressure as he did a week ago against the Vikings. And I know the Raiders' run defense isn't the best, but it won't have to be on this day, as the Lions have trouble running it, and even if they do, they're not facing a back like Adrian Peterson. And the Lions coaching staff isn't the greatest on even the best of days. Give me Jack Del Rio over Jim Caldwell any day of the week, especially on Sunday afternoons. The coaching alone will put the Raiders in all the right spots to beat this underperforming Lions team, and they could have a bit of a letdown after a big win in Green Bay. For my next pick, I like the Vikings a pick against the Packers. I know what you might be thinking right away. Aaron Rodgers losing 4 in a row? That could never happen. But this isn't your granddaddy's cheeseheads. With the loss of Jordy Nelson way back in the preseason, things are starting to show up on the field as the current Green Bay wideouts can't get much separation from their defensive backs, and the offensive line is beginning to show lots of holes, and Ryan Bulaga, the left tackle, isn't highly unlikely to play in this game, which that's not good news for Rodgers as it protects his blind side. And I think the Vikings will continue to put the hurt on Rodgers as edge rushers Griffin, Barr, and Joseph will be able to collapse the pocket and rush Rodgers before he wants to throw. And with the lack of a running game, he won't get any help from his friends, and the secondary will be able to hold up against their receivers. And on the other side of the ball, I think Teddy Bridgewater will be able to do some good things against their safeties, and the speed of the Vikings receivers will be too much for them. And I don't think their linebacking core and front seven will be able to hold up against Peterson. For my next pick, I have not one, but two upset specials for you.
Woo-ha. Woo-ha.
So let's get started.
Yeah.
With the Bengals +6 over the Cardinals.
Woo-ha.
The Bengals have another chance to show the nation that they can win in the bright lights of prime time. After wetting the bed against the Texans, I think the short week will do them a favor as they take on ex-Bengal Carson Palmer. But Carson Palmer might have some trouble on the offensive line, as in Iapati and Cooper, his two big guards, might be missing this game, which that's music to Atkins, Dunlop, and Johnson, as they'll be able to put lots of heat on Palmer and rush his throws. Just like last week when Iapati was out of the lineup, the Seahawks were all over him. And I think the Bengals will be able to match up well with their star receivers. And they'll be able to run the ball more than the Cardinals. For my next upset special, I like the Buccaneers +6 over the Eagles. This will be the first time under the Lovie Smith coaching staff where they can win 2 in a row. And I think they'll do it this week as they take on backup quarterback Mark Sanchez and their questionable offensive line. And I think the speed of the Tampa Bay front seven will be too much for them. And Doug Martin will have a big game. And their receiving core of Mike Evans and tight end will be able to do some things against the Eagles defense. So for my picks, here's a quick recap.